Um, as I was saying, last week we actually started talking about the second Adam and ended up dealing with the first man and a whole lot of other stuff. From that, as I said earlier, I was talking with Ron from some questions he had concerning it. And from that, he began talking about the idea of us not knowing who we are. And the reason for that is because we don't know the difference between Christ, Jesus, man, God, etc. And what dawned on me is that he was defined in darkness. That's what confusion is. The whole idea of confusion is not knowing or not being able to see clearly an event or a concept. So, and we are thoughts, therefore we are concepts. And we cannot see clearly who we are. I think I know where it started, but let me try to sort of lay a foundation. What I gleaned from what he was saying is that one of the major sources of the confusion came from the desire of the protectors of the holy books to manipulate the people who were in search of a deity, for lack of a better term. In saying that, my mind is going to, as I speak, I'm thinking that every single thing that pertains to what we call Christianity, which is actually post-Constantine Christianity, every single concept that pertains to this type of Christianity has its origin in Catholicism. Everything pertaining to Christianity after Constantine has its origin in Catholicism. It does not matter whether it is the Orthodox or Unorthodox Greek Church or the Anglican, it doesn't matter. All of it started from Catholicism, and they became splinter groups along the way. Are you following me? Now, with each group splintering off came a new set of concepts. A new dogma was produced for each one of them. And in the midst of the production of these principles came different conceptual analysis of who Jesus is, who the Christ is, that kind of thing. And in some cases, there were no delineations made between Jesus, Christ, God. The only separation there was man being separated from all of those concepts. And as a result of those principles coming into play, that is where this whole idea of confusion comes in. Now, the question is, why? What is the origin of the concept of confusion itself? Why was that allowed to happen? I don't see it clearly, but I think I see it clear enough to provoke some thought and maybe some questions. I would like to say that I believe the different dogmas that were put out there are representative of the flaming sword that were placed at the entrance to the tree of life. The entrance to the garden where the tree of life is. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I believe that be it the Anglican principles or the Protestant principles, it doesn't matter. All of these principles represent the flaming sword. Why so? Because the being from which everything emanates had no desire for unrightness, which is evilness, or for conceptual confusion to remain a staple in the lives of these beings that were created throughout eternity. I think that it was designed to encourage or to at least provoke what we call man to move in the direction of order and bring some order to himself, or to find order along this journey that we call life. Any questions about that? Am I making sense?
I have a question, but I don't think that's a platform.
Okay. Now,
I mean, what you're suggesting, or that's my question, that this inherent journey toward order is that seed is always there. In that sense, then I would think of what you said about the flaming sword as the image that came to my mind was sort of holographically, because when you take any piece of a hologram,
right,
you have the whole.
right,
So there's no great concern about this sort of distraction into this sort of fragmentation, because the way to the truth can still be found through those fragments.
right,
In the sense that people I read when I was younger, and even myself, I kind of pushed away from what I understood the Christian church to be teaching. You know, then maybe later to find that I could come back to it because there were things I grew up with that I could relate to, that I could use or see in a different way to make my journey that way. I didn't have to become Buddhist, so to speak.
right.
I could, but I learned something by appreciating what Buddhism maybe had to teach. But you can sort of, this is the journey that's like this writer I really appreciate, Nikos Kazantzakis, who did Zora the Greek and Last Temptation of Christ. Yeah, that's what he stated. He basically had to leave Christianity to find it. But then he came back. Unfortunately, the church didn't like it, but excommunicated him. But the point was, people, so in a way, I sort of try to, the people who come into my life would say, Christianity just doesn't work. I'm like, well, hang on, why? I don't think anything that you've been given is meant to be rejected. It just may be a particularly tricky journey, but that truth can still be found there. So that's the way I guess I understand what you're saying.
And I do, and I agree
That's right.
100% with the holographic
Yeah.
statement. I believe that all of us are holographs. We're just fragments of the same. But our pathways may be different, but the journey is the same. Now, when I talk, okay.
There's only three of us here.
He was like, I'm on the road.
Yeah.
You sure you want to ask it now?
So you're suggesting that we created the flaming sword?
Yes. I'm suggesting that there was absolutely nothing that was created that we were not a part of.
Yeah.
That's what I'm suggesting.
So we put it in our own way.
Yes. In a sense, we did. We are in our own way. We are our own enemy.
But I always understood the flaming sword to really be more of a protection. It's
It
like
is.
It's like chariots of fire. They're holding about chariot of fire. Or what's his name? The Greek guy who flew into the sun. You don't want to go where you're not ready to go.
Yeah.
So the sword isn't to prevent you.
It's not
a sort of protection, but it's something you can pass through by
right.
when you're ready.
It's not a defense. It's a protection. It's not a offensive weapon. It's a protection so that when you are ready, you can do it without destroying yourself, without self-destructing. And the sages talk about going into the other realm, and if you're not ready, then you may go, but your mind won't come back. So you come back without your mind, that kind of thing. When I'm talking about the flaming sword, I'm not, and I use the term Christianity because that's what most of us are most familiar with, but that is also true whether it be Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, etc. All of it, all of those isms are there, and all of these religious belief systems have a modicum of truth in all of them, but the truth is in this shell that we have formed around them, and the reason is because the truth has become like to us, it became to us rather like a grain of sand in a
Oyster?
in an oyster. It's become that because we're so comfortable with being who we say we are, as opposed to knowing who we are. So the greater confusion comes, the idea of confusion comes because we are, rather than opening the shell to find the truth or to see the truth, what we keep doing is building upon the shells that were put around the truth. And even those who have the resources that will help us see more clearly the truth, because of self-interest, always keeps it to themselves. So it's never put out there for us to understand, or to see rather. And when it is out there, then you're condemned for doing it, because everyone else enjoys and pleased. I don't mean this in a disparaging manner, but it seems as though everyone else is more comfortable being treated like a peon, or a servant.
Well, I think to go back a little to what you were saying 2 seconds ago, it's, I think, much more comfortable to live in delusion
Yeah.
than to face confusion,
Right.
right? But you don't.
When the
grow.
delusion is actually the confusion. But you don't see it that way because you're comfortable with
Well,
it.
it's a denial.
Yeah.
So you don't. It's.
So-
But I just wonder, this idea of leadership in the church, so to speak, and purposely misguiding or whatever. I don't know that the conspiracy is quite that intelligent. I just think most people, they may have the, you know what I'm saying? Because that sounds really like there are those who know and purposefully misrepresent. I think I'm more of a mind that they think they know, and maybe there's a glimmer of something in the center, but I can't believe people would that purposefully
They don't.
confuse others. You know what I'm trying to say?
The ones who know better are not the
They're
ones
not
we.
part of that. I would
They're
think.
not the one we see.
Yeah.
So it's more so just like a common army, correct? As far as the general, what the general has going on, the lower sergeants or whatever have no idea. They're just following out orders.
Well, it's like
I don't see it like, I see it more like what
I see it like the Iraqi conflict. The neocons knew what was going on.
Yeah.
The rest of the people that had no idea what the real reason was for going
Yeah,
into Iraq.
yeah, that's what I mean.
You see?
Yeah.
That
Okay, but
kind
the
of thing.
neocons had an ideology, they had a distorted, we can say, I think, I give out my politics, view, self-servingly held. But they didn't know the truth, the implication of what they were doing. They were driven by what their ideology would satisfy for them, right? We create this world of this, that, and the other thing, we have, well, whatever you want to call it. I think it's more like that old thing I grew up with understanding in Buddhism, that the student finds the teacher or the teacher finds the student. You can't, in the same way that Christ said, look, I'm not going to go through Galilee or my whole life doing all these healings, because then you're just going to think I'm a healer and you're not going to get the point. So
Well,
I think it's like that little Chinese guy, in the classic story, he's this old man's at the end of the road in this dirty, danky little shop, but he's the one who holds the truth. But you have to find him, because he knows if he stands on a soapbox on the corner of the street, no one's going to get it. You can't teach, you can't proselytize it, you know what I mean? Yeah. You have to be ready. So I think that's where I draw the distinction. And I don't think those people are at the core of a church. They're separate from it. They've left it.
Well, even with what you just mentioned, they still know to a certain point. There's still some lacking for the, that key thing to get them, I guess you would say, online with everything not to do that. But they still have more knowledge than the others that
I'll
they're
buy they have
manipulating.
more. They have more understanding, just like in any martial art or whatever, you have more
Yeah.
technique, but that doesn't mean you understand and have internalized the reality of what that the teaching really is. Otherwise, you wouldn't be false to it.
Yeah, I understand. That's what I'm saying. But they do have a lot more than normal.
They
Than those that
But
are under
I think it's
them.
like you said before too. Somebody has an epiphany, and in Asia, you then go sit someplace quietly for 5 seconds or 500 years until you figure out what you assimilate to it. Here in the West, you put up a sign on your front yard and
A little too
Hierarchy
small.
needs to be a little bit bigger.
Oh, okay.
I'm about to zoom
Okay.
in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
here in the West, you go put a sign in your front yard and you open a church
Right.
before
Yeah.
you even really know what it is.
And that's what, see, when you say that, it helped open this up. Culturally, your culture determines what you do with a
So you're
gift.
gonna use it.
Yeah.
That's-
And I'm saying that when have you seen this commercial on TV where it's Catholics Come Home?
Catholics come
Yeah,
home?
yeah, CatholicComeHome.com.
No.
One of the things that they say is, hi, we're the ones who compiled the Bible under the guidance of the Holy Spirit.
Of course.
That's one of the things that they say. Okay, now, during this course of the commercial, and they were absolutely right. They did compile the Bible. Now, I'm saying that the hierarchy knows what's going on. So what did they do? When they compiled the Bible, what they did, they took everything out that they couldn't manipulate. When you look at the books that are in the scripture, in the Bible, in relationship to the book of Enoch, the book of Thomas, Mary, they deal with deeply spiritual things or concepts that can't easily be manipulated. Then they also deals with the necessity of the female being prevalent in the course of spiritual development. All that's left out. That was purposely done. And ever since that has been left out, that hierarchy led by the Pope has manipulated everything that's dispersed as it pertains to Christianity. Now, what happened is there were popes, bishops, and priests, but they inserted the cardinals, and the purpose of the cardinals is actually the cardinals are the ones from which the popes are drawn, and they are the ones. They were the bishops who were most loyal to the church, and the ones who think along the lines of the hierarchy, and they have been taught to do that all of their lives. So, and they have been chosen to be cardinals based upon their ability, or their desire rather, not to upset the apple cart, to keep things intact, and to keep the dungeons of the Vatican protected from the eyes of people who are searching for the things that they've hidden. Now, what am I saying? Under the hierarchy of the Pope came the establishment of what is called the Universal Church, which is Catholicism. Out of that came the Protestant, etc. And ever since that, they have influenced everything. And everything they can influence, they attempt to destroy. Everything that they can influence, they attempt to destroy. Look what happened with the conquistadors. Look what happened with the wars between the Muslims and the Christians. And they still happen to this day. Look at what happened in Ireland. There was a war between the Protestants and the Catholics. It has more to do with religious beliefs than it does politics. And well, if you can separate the two, it's like tomato. So my point is that the ones at the tip of the pyramid know what's going on. It is no different than we think that we choose a president. We don't choose a president. Hell, he was chosen for us. We choose from the people they put forward. They give us a couple of people to choose from. We don't do that. It's become less and less involvement from the general public as time has gone on. And what has happened is there are determinations made by a group of people who meet in Sweden every other year as to the direction that the world is going to take. And it happens that way all the time. Now, that happens with world governments. This is the world church government. In 2000, the ecumenical movement was brought to the forefront. And that was when the Pope began to call the Protestants back home. And they had the ecumenical meeting in Rome. And that is when all of a sudden it was okay to be an evangelical and speak kind towards the Pope. Those kinds of things. So what's happening is that the conceptual religions are beginning to pool its authority. And in doing so, it is increasing the confusion amongst the people in the lower tiers. And the people in the lower tiers are the ones who, have an epiphany and then start a church. It's not going anywhere. And the reason it's not is because the principles are based on the charismatic, the Christian concepts that came out of Rome. Example, when the charismatic church first got started, it was started because of something happened in Azusa Street in Los Angeles. And there was a huge spiritual movement there. And the moment that it began to show promise, it also, there were men who also saw where they could make money from it. The Kenneth Hagins, Oral Roberts. They started out looking for spiritual things, but they ended up right where they started from in the beginning. Right back with the same foundational structures that the church had out of Catholicism. If none of them look deeply into the basic principles of baptism, of communion, all of them are the same. It does not matter what you look from the Catholic Church to the Charismatic Church and everything in between. All of them look at the foundational things through the same glasses. All of them do. No one sat down and decided that, maybe we should see this thing from the Aramaic and Hebraic perspective. Let's look at the languages and see what it actually means. They did not do that because it was not financially advantageous for them to do that. The excitement is what brought people. The newness of it all is what brought people. But when you start drilling down and looking at what they were doing, it was the same thing that people had walked away from. It was just done in a different manner. So what I'm saying is that all of this is the confusion. Every bit of this. It's the confusion that is representative of man not knowing who he is. Go ahead.
It sounds like the only thing that's taking place is what always takes place is ascension and descension, and they had an opportunity to ascend, but got caught up in an illusion to try and instead descended. But with that descending, that is still what they spread it out amongst everyone else that were under them.
Say that again. I was thinking about three different things.
Oh, it's fine.
So it's showing.
Basically, it seems like those at the top who were leading had an opportunity to descend or ascend. And what they did was they got caught up in an illusion, and instead of ascending, they descended with an illusion. And with that descension, they also spreaded that amongst everyone else that was under them. So basically, everything that they got was based on an illusion as well.
And right. And to this day, we are still ascending and descending.
But I think
Jacob's ladder.
But I think one of the things, haven't we met people in our lives? I certainly worked with Catholics in Haiti, who I think, I I don't have a meter I can put on them to tell you how close to the truth they are. But they certainly exude to me. They have a sense of the essence of the teaching.
Because
But
it's always there.
But the farther you get from
Yeah.
that structure,
Yes.
the more dangerous in terms,
Yes.
because people start thinking for themselves or start experiencing for themselves. And those people, the ones I know, are quiet about their religion. You know what I'm saying? They don't tie it back into proselytizing and
Right.
everything. They just quietly accept. And when you talk to them about the structure of the church and things, they don't have much to tell you, which suggests to me that they don't want to get sucked into that kind of logical argument for what's strong or weak in the structure of the church. You know what I mean? They're Catholic from their experience, but just like we might be in our Christian church, we're just quiet about the structure because I don't want to say what's good, bad, or ugly about that. You know what I mean?
And that's you're making my point exactly. That regardless of what structure you come out of, there are those who have these epiphanies, and they don't buy into all of this BS that's being propagated from the top, but they don't talk about it.
They don't deny it either.
No, they don't
Just
deny
kind
it.
of
They just-
quietly separate.
Just let me do my thing over in the corner,
Yeah.
and I'm fine. But at some point, you cannot remain
Well,
fine over in the corner. You have to speak what's real as opposed to what isn't. Now, what I'm saying is that this is representative of the religious confusion in terms of the idea of Jesus, God, Christ, man, Christian, Muslim. No set order. It's just up there. This is not an order at all. We not understanding the concept of any of these things, that's where the confusion comes from. Because if we were to truly understand the concept of everything that's on this board, and of course there could be hundreds of other things with it, okay? But if we were to understand the concept of just what's on this board, we would find out that every one of them are one. The true concept of them, they're the same. Every one of them is the same. And I could have put Muhammad just as easy as I put Jesus. I could put Moses just as easy as I put Christ. All of them are the same. The problem is that the man has chosen to define them in such a way that makes him feel comfortable, as opposed to being in search of what it really means. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying? And now, where did it come from? I think that it was not created to be that way, but the opportunity was presented for it to be that way or another way. When we look at Genesis, the 2nd chapter, and it says that then the Lord God formed man of the dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being or a living soul. Now, I believe that that is where the opportunity for all of this unrightness was presented. And rather than look at the source of what formed this entity called Adam, because that's what it is when it says man there, it's actually Adam. And I am very, very cautious when I use the term man interchangeably with Adam. And my caution is in that we think that a man that looks like what we see as men was the thing that's being spoken of here, and it was not. That's where my caution comes from. Are you understanding me? If not, okay, that's where my caution comes from. What was formed here was not a body. What was formed at this place were concepts. Now, the Adam was formed, was created in the other chapter, right? He created him male and female, remember? He created him androgynous. But that particular scripture in 1:27 has been taken to mean that he created them male and female, separately. But that's not what's indicated there. What's indicated there is that they were created as an androgynous being. Okay, now, when it gets to the second chapter, when it talks about the forming from the dust is representative of thoughts. So the thoughts were formed, and they were not formed by Elohim alone. They were formed by Yahweh and Elohim, because it says Yahweh and Elohim. Yahweh Elohim formed Adam from the dust of the earth. That could very easily be translated that that Yahweh and Elohim formed the concept of Adam from the earth consciousness, or from a different consciousness than what they were formed from. So when these concepts or these thoughts were formed from that consciousness, that in itself presented the opportunity for what? It presented the opportunity for you to develop the consciousness as you chose to, or to take that consciousness and mold it into the consciousness that was going to help you to avoid the delusion of being separate from the entities that created you from the beginning. The choice is yours. And the choice that we made was to see ourselves as being separate beings. And in doing so, we descended the ladder, which is also a continuum. We descended the ladder to the point where we became solidified, or we became these objects of beings that we think are solid. We slowed down to the point where time came into being, and in doing so, we began to see ourselves as being different from the source from which we emanated, which means that we saw ourselves as being different from Elohim and different from Yahweh, and because we saw ourselves as being different, now we have to bring something into being to help us along this journey, and that is done in conjunction with Yahweh. And the thing that happens is there is Yeshua who comes through the womb of a woman who we bring into being because we need someone to show us how to travel this road to warn this again. And the one, Jesus, Yeshua, is the one who does that for us, wherein it may have been Buddha for someone else. Now, as Christians, we're taught not to accept that. Not because Christianity says don't accept it, but because Catholicism has told Christians don't accept it. You see? How did they do that? Because everywhere they went and people were not agreeing with them, they destroyed what they call their gods and their beliefs. And that is the reason books. Fatima, Mary, all those folk are the same in Catholicism. In the idea of, what is it, Muhammad's wife was a nun? So all of these things, there was an attempt to co-opt anything that was different than what the Pope was putting forward. So that in itself increased the confusion. That in itself made way for the chaotic conditions that surrounds what we call religion, but in actuality, it surrounds everything in life. That's what the chaos is. See, we cannot separate religion from what we call everyday life. And the reason I say that is because when you look at the origin of the word religion, it comes from the Latin. Re means to do again, and ligus, which is ligaments, to connect. So it's talking about reconnecting to your origin. That's what religion is supposed to be doing. But what has happened, religion sees as its origin, especially through through Christianity, as its origin, the Pope. And regardless of how the evangelicals deny it, everything that they do has as its origin the Catholic Church. Everything. And you cannot look into the scriptures and say that a tree is known by the fruit that it bears without understanding that the fruit that a tree bears is dependent upon the root system in the tree. If there is no root system, there is no fruit. Am I right? So what is the root system for evangelical Christianity? The Catholic Church. So there is no difference. And regardless of how far they try to get away from it, the connection is still there. So what happened? As Richard was saying earlier, in the East, someone may have an epiphany. Maybe it's a Hindu who has an epiphany, and he says that this doesn't make sense. This is too controlled, too organized. And he goes somewhere and sits and ponders and meditates and comes up with something totally different than what he's been taught through Hinduism. But in this country, the same epiphany comes, and you end up on Charter Road with a group of people trying to find some direction, as opposed to going up to Asheville into the mountains. And, but the desire is the same, and the struggle is not having the desire. That's not the struggle. The struggle is trying to maintain that desire without it being externally influenced by something that's going to suck you right back into the same system that you are seeking to move away from, because you want clarity in your thinking and you want order in your journey. Questions? Are you thinking?
No, me analogously. I mean, this is basically the essence of meditation. The moment you try to characterize that moment of sense of connection, you lost it.
Yes.
You can't help but lose it, because now, just like you say in subatomic physics, every time you look at it, you change it. Every time you characterize it, you redefine it in some way. So the difficulty is to be there without needing to
just let it be.
Yeah, which is
that's it. What do you do? We study scriptures. That's what we do. So, are you a Christian? Pre-Constantine.
I'm glad you didn't tell that guy who walked in here or something like that.
What does that mean?
He already got a shock looking around.
Yeah.
Did he?
Yeah, pre-Constantine. Yeah. Because I don't want, not only do I not want to characterize it myself, but I don't want you to put you in a position to thinking you can too. Because when you say pre-Constantine Christianity, they don't know what the heck you're talking about. Oh, okay. That's usually the response that I get. Now, if you push it further, then I will carry you further. Why? Because it is imperative that we understand that cultures are developed from different avenues of confusion. If cultures were so deeply ingrained, or such a deep truth that they could never be transferred to someone else, then someone being born in one culture and carried as an infant to another culture would never be able to fit in. Cultures are designed to make you feel comfortable. That's what they do. Where you are, you fit in. Wherein a desire to understand the origin of your being or of your essence is not necessarily designed to make you fit in. It's actually designed to make you uncomfortable. And in search of the essence of who you are, your being uncomfortable propels you toward the oneness of everyone and everything that exists. Because at some point you begin to understand that the essence of who you are is not different than the essence of who I am, or the essence of someone in South America or someone in South Africa. The essence is the same, regardless. So, and that carries us back also to this whole idea, of racism, where racism is simply a manifestation of a desire to perpetuate the sense of separateness. That's it. That's it sounds so simplistic, on the surface, but that's what racism is. That's the purpose of it. That's what it does. And the more we move away from it in terms of our desire, the more we begin to see that there is unicity in our essence. And it seems as though out of all the things that separate us, like economics, social living, all the things that separate us, the most difficult one to overcome is racism. And I think that it is because it is more apparent. And I do believe that is why it is extremely necessary for there to be relationships on every level across racial lines, not because of different races, but recognizing that people are people at the essence is the same, bottom line. And when that began to take place, then the walls those walls that appear to separate us began not only to fall, but they don't fall, they just disappear. They begin to disappear. And when they disappear, then you don't have to talk about, are you mixed? Or is this an interracial relationship? You don't have to talk about stuff like that. It's not that, it's a relationship. To talk about an interracial relationship is like telling me I got a half brother. I got a half brother, he whole. That's crazy. I mean, you see what I'm talking about? You have a relationship. But when we add that interracial to it, it is creating the sense of separateness again. And we have to avoid that. We have to change the way we talk. So that we can change the way we act. And when we do that, it will filter into the rest of the universe, and other people will begin to do the same thing. Am I making sense? Because we think about the educational divide that we used to talk about. And then when people of little means began to get their education, there was no separation anymore. People didn't even talk about the educational divide. They don't talk about it anymore. Because if we were going to be educated on the basis of economics, I never would have gotten that education. Because they couldn't afford it. Meaning my parents.
I was reading this article in Essence about this lawyer, whatever guy, out of Stanford, who wrote this book advocating that black women should date other men besides black men. And he was saying,
Bro, somebody's at drums. Heal them in the name of Jesus.
and he was saying part of the reason he came to that understanding is because, in a way, black women who don't give a lot of power, they give a lot of power to black men, and in effect diminish their own sort of self-worth and power. So if he was saying that if black women did date outside of the black male experience, then they can realize and take away some of that power in terms of it being not a positive thing, not a positive influence. So It's interesting that you would say that because he's saying that if that happens, it would bring balance back
Yeah.
to the whole thing.
And is it not what we're talking about?
Yeah.
I was at the mall the other day, and I saw, and that's one of the things that stopped me thinking about this whole interracial
Well,
mix.
balance is my word. That wasn't his word.
Yeah,
But
okay.
that's how I see it.
Okay.
Bringing balance.
I'm trying to be more correct.
Yeah.
I saw this couple whose wedding I had done, one Indian, one African American, and what?
What do you prefer, African American or Black American?
I don't care. Whatever comes out.
I don't care.
I don't care.
I'll tell you how I do it.
Uh,
I tend, if I'm talking about politics,
yeah,
it's Black American.
yeah.
If I talk about culture, I might say African American.
Okay, and the reason I
Yeah,
use
sure.
African American more or less than black is because with me, conceptually, black goes back to slavery and stops. African American goes beyond slavery. And if you go back to slavery and stop, that means that you have no existence prior to, and that's very dangerous.
And I guess I use Black American more than African American because I think the issue still is color, not culture.
Okay, and I see I use African American because back in the day when Jess and all the rest of them were fighting us for saying we were African Americans, we all of a sudden it became popular to be African American. And we were saying African American, they were saying we black. We have no connection to Africa, and we were teaching African history, and we were talking about the connections there.
Well-
So mine is highly
Okay,
personal.
but I mean that makes sense anyway because all the immigrations were cultural.
Yes.
Irish, Polish,
Right.
Scottish.
Yes,
So if you wanted to be legitimate, you would push the discussion in that direction.
right,
If you wanted to deal with the elephant in the road, it's black.
yeah.
It's not culture.
So, but anyway, that's I saw them, and I saw their child
Sorry, you needed to
at the
say
mall, and and when I looked at the child, I began to talk to him, and it hit me. If anyone saw him with this child, they would assume that his wife was white. Because the child looks like what we call a mixed child. But his wife is Indian. And
American or subcontinent?
Indian.
Asian.
Indian. And I'm like, okay. I knew something was there, but I didn't know what. So then it hit me. That's what the separation is. When we do all these interracial identities. You see, as opposed to seeing a child, you see a biracial child. And you cannot determine, we get into the point, you can't determine, is it really biracial? Because not necessarily so. Because we have someone from India and an African American has a child, that if you set that child someplace other than, it would be, this is a child who was born to a Caucasian and an African American. We have to not blur those lines. We have to destroy those lines. That's where the separation comes in. That's what generates superiority complexes. And when we began to deal with those things, we began to move in the direction of some kind of clarity so that all of these other things won't divide us. Because right now, when I looked at the whole Lowe's thing, right? You know, Lowe's pulled an ad from the Muslim thing. I ain't been in Lowe's since. The Muslim reality show was on. I never seen it, but what happened?
Muslim reality show?
Yes, and Lowe's was one of the sponsors. And this guy from Florida wrote Lowe's saying that you need to show the real face of Islam is violent, etc., etc. And Lowe's pulled an ad. And it created an uproar. And some Jews and Christians got together and went to Lowe's and took 11 petitions to them telling them this is wrong. You need to, reverse but they have not done it. I haven't been in since. You know, Clark said Molly are always boycotting something. So Lowe's is on my boycott list for the time being anyway. Why, huh?
Because that would have went a long way in showing Americans the real lives of the majority of Muslims, and so that whole fear and everything that what they thought of them would be thrown out the window.
Now, the other part of that is this. That was the greatest thing that could have happened to the reality show. Because it got national headlines everywhere. People who I didn't even know it was on until that. Now, Russell Simmons bought all the time that Lowe's walked away from. Russell Simmons.
Okay.
And now the show is still on and the viewership quadrupled.
Sure.
You know, so it's just, I boycotted because of what they did, but what they did
It helped.
actually helped,
Yeah.
you know? So what, and I don't want to get into the whole boycott matter, the issue thing,
No,
but
I
my
don't.
point is,
Completely lost, but it's okay. Well, I don't understand what a reality show is. First of all, because I've never seen one that has anything approaching reality.
that, okay, but
And
that's
so
what it
now
is.
we're doing on the basis of religion.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm waiting for a Hindu reality show. What
Okay.
what we gonna?
I don't know.
You know what stereotypes? So I don't think of anything positive when I hear those words used together.
it don't matter. But yeah, I don't care. I didn't even know it existed. I don't watch reality shows. I don't have time. But anyway, my point is that when we began to tear down erase these lines, destroy these lines, it is at that point that it doesn't matter what you call yourself. When you call yourself a Muslim or a Christian, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you do not recognize yourself as being superior to anyone. That's what matters.
Or separate from.
Or separate from anyone. Everybody's one. So it doesn't matter whether you call yourself Janice, I call myself James, and you're Janice James. But anyway, you call yourself Janice, I call myself James, but we're not separate. That's what's important. The important thing is that I don't see myself as being superior or inferior to you. I see myself as being you. That's how I see me. And when we began to see, that, then things began to really change. What is it, Richard?
No, I get what you're saying. I think it's just that me and my journey, by wanting to know who this other person is and what they're all about, I learn more about myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I need that. I want that connection and communication. So it diminishes my sense of separateness. That I agree
And
with.
that's it.
But that exercise, if you want to call it that, my journey,
Mm-hmm.
which took me out of one geographic place and spread around, because that's just my way, facilitated that, I hope, awareness and growth. But I appreciate both. I suppose in a sort of ha-ha, funny, superficial way. I mean, a rose by any other name is a flower,
Yeah.
but I also appreciate roses versus lilies versus whatever, But yeah, I don't want to think these are weeds and these are flowers kind of thing. There's something else motivating that distinction. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. See, right now, I was talking to Don yesterday, and he was talking about, he said, and I'm going to dress up some, because y'all know. He said, he says,
Beep.
yeah. he says,
What's that? Okay.
you'd be amazed at the stuff that these people believe on the web, on the Facebook and stuff, the stuff they put up there, their beliefs in, and the people that they follow and what they teach. And believe you me, that's just squeaky clean. And I said to him, no. And so he began to go through some of the things that, that people believe and what they're teaching. And he said, and I don't know where they get this stuff from. and I said to him, Don, it's no different than someone who primary objective is to stay high. And they go into a town they've never been in before, and in 5 minutes they can get whatever they need to get high. Because the energy draws them to that. They are drawn to each other. So these people who are teaching and buying into all these, concepts, that was already there. They're just being drawn to each other. And he said, well, I don't know why this would have to happen this way. And that doesn't sound like Don, does it? But anyway. And my response to that was, it is necessary, because every thought that's in us, everything that we have manipulated, everything that we try to manipulate for control or for whatever, has to be brought to the forefront so it can be dealt with. We have to deal with it. We have to come face to face with it, regardless of how vulgar you may think it is or how profane you may think. It doesn't matter. It has to be brought to the forefront, and it has to be addressed. So in essence, this is what I'm saying about everything else. It has to be brought out. There is anything that's felt to be sacrosanct and has to be left behind or too vulgar to be, brought to the forefront to be addressed is going to bite you in the butt later. It has to be done. And I do believe that one of the main reasons that the Creator allowed this way-up thing to be created the way it is so that all these things could be brought to the forefront at such a time as this, so that they can be filtered and they can be dealt with and they can be addressed. And Don, he's constantly addressing them, and the way he addresses them makes plenty of sense. I just wish he would, just describe it to me the way he addressed them, as opposed to saying what he really feel.
But you understood immediately what he said.
God, yes.
So there you go. I think maybe that's the difference. Yeah, I'm thinking again, chariots, fire, flaming sword stuff. What you had in culture, the structure of a society was to sort of manage that. The question was whether it did it in a positive or a negative way. It either repressed it and denied that it was there, or it was a society that was more inclusive but found a way to more gently let those things come to the surface, if you know what I mean, and so people could deal with them. Because if it hits you in the face too much too fast, it's going to be overwhelming, frightening, and then that's going to create all the kind of reaction that creates. But if you find it on the web, that's just a silly little one-dimensional image on a screen. You can turn them off if anybody still has the power to turn off their computer. I'm not sure that's true, but you know what I mean? You can look at it and it's not in your face.
Yeah.
Whereas in the 50s, 40s, it was physically there and it was going to hurt you or create chaos. So in a way, maybe this is a more benign way, but you're right in the sense that it's bringing to the surface the stuff you didn't think was that wacky and possible, but it's there.
Yes, and I think what happens when it brings it to the surface, it kind of sort of filters it out to the point where everything comes to a head. You know what I'm saying? Where you get to the point where the Christ, as we have been taught, doesn't matter. That God doesn't, that Jesus doesn't. All these things don't matter anymore. And the reason they don't matter is because all of them are found in the Adam, that entity that was created from the beginning. You understand what I'm saying? When you think about the concept of Messiah, we talked about last week the consciousness of Messiah and Elohim and Yeshua and Adam and how all these things, that did form his own order. Because I didn't intend it for it to be in an order, but when you look at that, it did. Because, when you talk about these spiritual entities here, that's the connection between those. So these things, that's what filtered out of this, is it not? In a very subtle way, all this filtered out of that. And at some point, we have to get to the place where we don't try to make sense of it all, but we let it all make sense of us. Make sense to us, rather. Because when we try to make sense of it all, we get to the point of characterizing again. But when we allow it to make sense to us, then we began to see that it started right here when the man was formed from the dust of the ground, from that consciousness. And that consciousness from which he was formed gave him opportunity to make those decisions. And when he did that, we ended up in the state that we are currently in. And
I think that does go back, maybe, to loop it back to the whole Catholic Church, the hierarchy and the way it's structured. Yeah, I've always, not always, but I have felt, at one time or another, all of this structure, which to a certain degree is constructive. It helps give people some sense of direction, organized movement if you want. But beyond a certain point, it's controlling, it's limiting, and holds you back. And a challenge of any structure, sooner or later, capitalism, is that if it can't hold itself back, eventually it just overwhelms whatever that population is, and it can only try to control everything. You know what I'm trying to say?
Mhm.
When in truth, it was only meant to be a guide. And then it's like when maybe you, okay, Montessori, you grow up through school, you start out with a lot of structure, but as you mature, you're given more freedom to pursue your learning experience yourself with some tools, as opposed to maybe in a more conventional classroom environment, you're controlled. They just change the subject matter, which
Right.
is probably why middle school and high school, at least most guys, aren't there one way or another. You know what I'm trying to say?
yeah, I do understand
And I
it.
think
Yeah.
that's the great conflict maybe between organization and what we call chaos, which isn't chaos really.
It really isn't. See, we define chaos as to what fits our needs. Because see, I believe that the more structured, especially males, more structured they have at home. I'm sorry, when I say structured, let me explain what I mean. The more structure they have at home, that allows them to develop their own pathway within boundaries, of course, as opposed to developing a pathway for them. Those are the ones that you will find who usually stay in the middle school settings because they have that kind of freedom at home that guides them, as opposed to sets them to cement. But the ones who don't have that at home are generally the ones who walk away from it all because they are not going to submit to that structure that puts them in a pen, that guides them over the cliff. They're not going to do that. Hell, this is go jump off the cliff and call it a day. Let me just do this and get it over with. And the more intelligent, and I use that cautiously as well, the more intelligent they are at that age, or the more curious, maybe I should say, the more curious they are at that age, the less likely they are to finish school. The less curious they are, the more likely they are to go through that setting. And you would think it's just the opposite, but it really isn't. The more curious, because the more curious they are, the more there's an attempt to control.
Well, they want to get out of the box.
Yes. So
the end game is a cubicle.
yes, that's the end game. See, and all of that happened
Literally.
when capitalism took over education.
Well,
Yeah, literally.
With
That's
a
what
computer.
happened
With
when
a computer
capitalism
That's
took
the
over
job.
education.
in a cubicle.
Before capitalism took over education, education was designed for men to learn, period. But when capitalism took over education, it was designed to train you to work for them.
Yes.
That's it. You are trained to get a job. You're not taught to think. And education was because even being a doctor was no different than being a brick mason. You learned by working with a doctor, as opposed to this being some kind of superior profession. You just chose to be a doctor rather than a brick mason. But as far as the thinking that was concerned, that's what education was. It was designed to make you think, period. But now it's not that way. It's just the opposite. And as a result of that, we now have a whole society that is easily manipulated by a media that is controlled by the capitalist interests.
Yeah.
So what do we do with that? We have to get back to the place where we began to see that we were not created to be mere men. We were created to be Elohim. That's who we were created to be. And the Father intended for us to be Elohim so deeply until Yeshua came with the consciousness of Elohim to show us how to travel this journey.
Jesus said we do greater things, didn't he?
Yeah.
So there's your mentor, classic sort of Asian mentor concept right there. Not controlling.
Not controlling.
But my success, so to speak, is in seeing my student go farther than me.
And that's the whole concept. It should be the whole concept of teaching. The objective, and I've said it since I've been teaching, that my objective is to teach myself out of job. But by pastoring, your whole objective for pastoring is to make sure everybody stay beholden to you, so that you can increase the numbers.
That's going back to the servitude thing then, about what a true servant is, which is what a true teacher is, or what Jesus really was, a servant to the people to push them further than where he was at.
Yes. That's the whole concept, to push them further. So that you don't end up. So, in actuality, my objective is for everyone to be a teacher. That's my objective. Because when you look at the scriptures prior to Nimrod, every man was his own teacher. There was no leader in terms of the hierarchy of the ecclesiastical order. There was no ecclesiastical order until Nimrod. And from Nimrod forward, there was the ecclesiastical order served more as a hindrance than an enhancer.
Sounds like just being pushed in a direction for self-discovery.
Yes.
But I'm gonna have to ask the person sitting next to me. But I always thought in the concept of teaching is built in the idea of learning. Your teacher, your students teach you
Oh, yes.
something, as opposed to preaching, which sounds one directional.
Well, what do you mean?
It's what do you call it? Didactic?
Yeah.
It's me spewing to you.
Yeah.
Teaching is a little bit more of an interchange. Oh, I didn't think about it that way.
And that's one of the reasons
That's what a teacher is.
we have kind of sort of morphed into no lesson preparation. As much as, you know what, I saw this thing and I got this thought about it, let's talk about this. So the teaching becomes the questions as opposed to the outline. Because, I can do a sermon, that's the easiest thing in the world to do.
But that also means that we participate in your
Learning process.
the formation of those questions.
Yeah, that happens every time we teach.
Yeah.
Every single time.
Well, we wouldn't let you just stand up there and talk to us.
I wouldn't be able to.
But the easiest thing in the world to do is to do sermon preparation. That's the easiest thing in the world to do. Now, deliverance is a whole different ballgame. Because deliverance, acceptance of deliverance is not based upon what's being said. Acceptance of deliverance is based upon how it's being said. We in the African American church determine whether or not you can preach by how you sound, not by what you say. If the ones who, okay, let me personalize it.
Well,
When I'm teaching, it's great. When they need me. But when there is not a need, nobody want to be challenged, they want to be entertained. And what I had an experience this week. I thought about it later on. I went to Sheldon's granddad's funeral. And when I got there, I was late police pulled me over and I got late, so. Anyway, when I walked in, I asked for the program. I was in the back of the sanctuary place. And when the lady handed me the program, I sat down in the back because, you know, I didn't want to disturb what was going on. And I looked at the program and it had words of comfort, Pastor James Bridget. And my first response was, oh, because I didn't know it. And at that point, I went back to the people and said, that right there, that's me. And they, where are they? And I found out that they were just one person above where I was supposed to be, right? So by the time I sit down, it's virtually time for me to get up. And I got up and I talked. And afterwards, Shelley and I had talked about it. But then, now let me clear some things up. It's virtually my fault. Because when I was called and asked to, you know, do a prayer or preside, I said, of course, I'll send you a copy of the program. I don't need that. You don't have to do that. Whatever you put me on program to do, I'm fine with it. I can do it. Not realize, of course, that was going to be it. But anyway, I thought later on, I said, you know what? I wonder how effective would the average pastor have been caught in that situation? Because of the amount of purchasing of messages or preparation of messages that goes into delivering, and not necessarily, you know what I'm talking about? See, in my class on Mondays, I tell them, you're not studying to deliver a message, you're studying to understand. And if opportunity presents itself, then you have something to say. And I just wonder how many would have been able to do that. Then I put myself in that position when I first started preaching. I would have been mortified had I walked in and that happened to me. I could have taught, but it wouldn't have been about the scriptures. I hadn't been talking about what happened in these politics, you know. I could talk about the other day. But I think that each one of us in this room should be in a place where, regardless of what you have to do in terms of bringing comfort or understanding to people, you're prepared to do that at any time in your life. You know, whether you're aware of it coming your way or not, you're supposed to be prepared to do that. That's who we are, isn't it?
I think everyone in here is, whether or not they realize that, I think they are that. Just by coming here, period, because that's what actually happens here every day with the questions and everything else.
You know, you could have told me that when I first looked at that program, though.
Well, but you go through that me
Yeah.
part, and I can get up and talk to anybody about anything. We already know that, and if you're smart, if you're smart, you try to limit that. But anyway, because and some days I'm better than others, but it's all about what do they want to hear? What do they, you know what I mean? It's
And
like, it's not me. It's not me. This is why a good actor will tell you, you get yourself out of the equation. It's the part you're playing. And I don't mean it to sound in a cheap way. I just mean it's like when you get nervous, it's because you're thinking it's all about me.
You're just being
What am
what you
I
need to
going to
be.
say? And you get up there and say, okay, this is about this. I know something about that. Let's start with this and we'll go where it goes.
Well, I think that's what he did. He after he got over the initial part, it's like, okay, what do I need to be now? So it wasn't even me. It's just he was what needed to be.
What do you want them to take away?
Well, what happened, they had put a scripture. There was a scripture beneath
That's just to make it
for
a little
me
more,
to use
yeah.
as a basis of what I had to say. Guess what it was? 1 Corinthians, 15th chapter, verses 50 through 58. That which is sown in incorruption is raised in, that which is sown in corruption is raised in incorruption. And my first response to that was, okay, I'm going to do this. Because that which is, the thing that corrupts is religion itself. And then I heard the little voice say to me,
Not today.
no, not the place, not the time. So I graciously said that, I see the scripture, here. However, I think I need to speak from my heart. I need to say what I feel as opposed to along the lines of what's written here. And that's what I did. Because had I taken that, there's no way in the world that I could have stood there and spoken concerning that scripture the way that I have been taught that it means, when I know, I know clearly that's not what it means. So that was an instance of knowing the truth, but knowing also that it was not time for that particular truth to be brought forth. Because that particular truth could have been deeply damaging to a lot of people who already felt damaged by the separation, what they saw as separation of a loved one. So rather than do that, I guess I ended up helping them to see that there is no separation and that they are still connected, that kind of thing. Without even knowing because to be honest with you, if you were to ask me to give you 2 minutes of what I said, I can't do it. So again, every one of us must be in position to be teaching. And a teacher is someone who presents what people need at that time, as opposed to what you want to present. Like the 23rd Psalm. As opposed to what you want to do. You do what is needed at that particular time. So I'm done with that. I hope I brought some clarity to this idea of what the source of the confusion that we are, and when we can bring some order to the understanding of each one of those, I think we will get to the place where, and when I say each one of those, I'm talking about the concept of Jesus, God, Christ, Adam, man, whether it be Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Muhammad, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Bring some clarity to it, because I do believe that one of the greatest things I've ever studied in my life was it was in a course called Comparative Religions. And in that course of Comparative Religions, what I began to see was a common thread that ran through all of them. And now when I look at it retrospectively, I see the thread that was most apparent was one of enlightenment. Every one of them were enlightened in the same vein. And they were saying the same things when it came to, the surface stuff was BS for all of them. But the depth of thought were the same thoughts that would bring light to men regardless of where they were or what their cultural background is. I saw that in comparative religions. And I gleaned more from the comparative religion than I did from the course that I had in comparative philosophies, because that was crazy. But the religions were really the same. They really were. So I think that if we meaning men, move beyond our religious doctrinal biases and look at things for what they really are, then all of us will begin to see that there is a common thread that runs through all of them. Now I'm done. Okay, I thought I was.
I wanted to make a point that the sense of separateness that we feel is what makes it possible for people to be taken advantage of in the way that they are, in terms of the powers that control the world that we live in. And I thought about that because of the Occupy movement and the people that get together. One person might be homeless, another person might be a doctor, but they'll sit down together and discover the things that they have in common. And once that happens, it's impossible for people to control one another. And it's impossible to be so greedy that you oppress one another if you understand that you're not separate.
Well, the first thing that they did to try to destroy the movement was to separate people. Right now, they're in denial. What's that dude's name? The dude in Indonesia, the Azizi dude, that Muhammad Aziz, who
The one that set himself on fire?
set himself on fire.
Oh.
That guy, that's where it all stemmed from.
Yeah.
the whole, Arab Spring type thingy, all of it stemmed from that. And the Occupy thing, that's where it stemmed from. But the whole concept of we're different, this is different from the Arab Spring, this is different what happened in Indonesia, this Occupy thing is different. That's what they're perpetuating to separate people from that, when in actuality it's the same. And guess what? There's no difference. The only difference between what happened in Oakland and Syria is that in Syria people were killed, and in Oakland they beat the hell out of them. But the concept is the same. And when you look at every police force in America has been militarized. Every police force in America
And now they want drones.
have been militarized. Every one of them.
Already.
That's a big
Some
brother.
already have them.
So it, again, divide and conquer. And that's what the concept is. But I do not think it's going to work. I don't. I
It's
don't.
already changed.
Yes, it has, and you can't put the genie back in the bottle or the
Yeah.
toothpaste back in the tube. But you can use your last wish and she'll go back to the bottle.
Because
And the wish for more genies.
Well, okay. I'm a little more cautious than that. You can't put the genie back in the bottle in the same way the genie was in the bottle. But it's just like with the military in Egypt. We still don't know how all that's going to fully play out, but it won't be the same as before.
Right.
But it could still be
Okay.
much less than people ideally would like to think it is.
Well, and I
'Cause-
honestly, I think we're in a different. The energy field is different now. That's my optimism. I think we have a greater opportunity to influence it than we've ever had before, because we understand that influence is not necessarily being in a geographical place to influence something, as opposed to desires and thoughts and this discussion, the concept that we would like to see. Because I remember when this thing started, one of the things that I was speaking with someone, I said to them, you know what we have to do is make sure that Obama stops avoiding these Occupy people and their concepts kind of find their way into his campaign. And it wasn't a couple of weeks before, speaking extemporaneously, those concepts began to flow from his mouth. So I'm saying that we have a tremendous amount of influence, because of the way and some people think I'm crazy, but I truly believe this, because of the way the planets are lining up, because of the flow of energy that we are, the way our energy flows now.
What's funny is just recently I'm not promoting him or anything like that. I'm not promoting anything. I'm just saying as a result of that, recently what has happened is his approval rating is shooting up very quickly, that he has started to acknowledge the people.
Yeah, and that's when it turned. When the first time he did that speech and acknowledged some of those concepts, everything began to turn. Now, I don't believe for a moment that his heart is there. His heart is on Wall Street with everybody else's. I do, that's in that whole political spectrum. I believe that.
But didn't he? I think he said, he used the Roosevelt phrase in his campaign before he was elected. He said, "You're going to have to make me do this."
Yes.
And I think that's something really people should be telling each other.
And he used that a couple of weeks ago again.
And so in a way, if he's saying that again, actually
Yeah.
that's to his credit, because he is saying, "I want to go there with you, but you're going to have to make this process take me there, take us there."
Yeah. And Neil, so
Which I think is democracy.
yeah, so I do believe that we have that kind of influence. That's all I'm saying. I believe that. I believe we can influence anything that we choose to influence. And I also believe something else. I believe that there have been any number of people who've been through this place. And if we had all the people who's been through here were here all at one time, it wouldn't be wrong. But I believe that things have kind of, how you have brains in a bucket and they kind of settle down? I think it's settled down, things are settled down now to the point where we are recognizing that we are indeed one. and that we are more on the same page in terms of the direction we're moving in than we've ever been before, and that the whole idea of the religiosity is being filtered out more so than ever before. So we are at a point of what? Well, I can't think of that other word. I want someone to use this one. We're at a point of spirituality that we've never been before. We're beginning to think more esoteric than we've ever thought before. And that's the thing that's going to help us to see, not with our eyes, but with the manifestations, the magnitude of influence that we have.
We're already doing more, being more than merely men, and doing more than what Jesus did, because we're guiding mankind.
Yeah, and that's, okay, because that's one of the things we talked about too, in terms of guiding the whole movement itself. That's one of the other things we talked about, influencing it by the concepts that we search for and understanding of.
Because you think about it, all the different occupies, the Arab Springs, and everything else around the world with the uprisings, we helped cause that.
No question. I believe that. I do. Because you know how easy it is when we talk about, these things that are really, really bad that's happening. Well, you caused it.
Yeah.
By designing life.
That's what I was talking about.
But the other half of it you did too.
Yeah.
And the chaotic condition of our thought patterns is something that we have to fight through. Because of those chaotic conditions of our thought patterns, you have to refrain from saying, that can't be. What kind of arrogance must you have to think that you can influence all this stuff? Those are the kinds of things that keeps us in bondage. So we have to move beyond.
Just make yourself smaller every time you do that.
Every time you do that, you put yourself. In actuality, you actually increases the gravitational hold. So you keep yourself down.
When you first started, I was thinking about it, going back to what Ron asked. It is impossible. We can only talk about certain characteristics that we have, but it's impossible for us to define what we are, just because we are equivalent or the same as the unnamed one being unnamed, just because it's nowhere possible to define it.
Well, you're exactly right. And everything we talk about are characteristics. I mean, when you look at the only ones who call us who we are is when James say he's James. But when you look at the scriptures, these labels are not considered as a label in terms of I'm James, but it's talking about a responsibility. Because Yeshua is God delivers. So that's a responsibility as opposed to that's what his name is.
Mm-hmm.
Like we determine names are. And when we begin to see ourselves from that perspective, it makes all the difference in the world. It really does. For everyone in the world, as a matter of fact. So, are we done?
Next time we get together, it'll be 2012.
Next time we get together, be 2012.
Oh, I thought we
When
did.
do we meet next
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
Isn't
It'll be 2012.
No.
No.
We meet on the
We meet
last-
Saturday. Yeah, I'll be here next Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Oh, there's 31 days.
Yeah, I'll be here on this side.
We gotta have our watch night service.
We will be watching.
My wife not gonna be down there. My wife not even gonna rain in Hampton. Okay. Now this is that watch night thing. When we first started doing that, after I was pastoring, I started doing research on it.
What is that?
I'll explain in a second. And I started doing research on it, and when I found out how pagan it was, I stopped doing it. And I'm so glad I found out, because I'd be so sleepy. Watch night is when you get up, when you have church service on the last day of the year, and you're supposed to be preaching when the new year comes in. And that is designed It said that if you do that, then you'll be in church, for the whole year.
Yeah.
That kind of, huh?
Wow, we woke up somebody.
I beg your pardon?
Oh, disagree.
Oh,
Okay.
who was that? Rain. Oh, okay.
No.
Rain.
Oh, Rain. Oh, okay. Yeah, but that's what that
Rain
was.
done, but that wasn't me.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm saying.
That sounds like another kind of New Year's resolution, though. I mean,
But that's
it lasts 36 hours, kind of thing.
but you had to be up preaching at 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, and then, but when I found out how pagan it was, that's when I stopped doing it, because I saw that it had more to do with the I'm sorry, I did. Let me change that word pagan. When I saw how when I saw how ungodly or unspiritual it was, I stopped doing it. And the reason I changed the word pagan is because pagan actually means country dweller, and it was made it was applied by the Catholic bishops to the people who lived in the country, in the countryside,
And they were just
because they refused to accept Catholicism.
And they were just the indigenous people of
Right,
that
of that-
particular area.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why they called them pagans. They didn't dwell in the cities, and they were not accepting of Catholicism. So let me rephrase that.
So we're sort of pagan.
Yeah, we are definitely pagans.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
That sounds like a T-shirt. I'm definitely pagan. Whoa.
And
Maybe put that on the back because you'd be
you said
far enough away.
the back of the pagan.
And then it goes the same thing with the winter solstice, the celebration of the winter solstice
yeah.
being monopolized.
Yeah.
The winter solstice celebration has been going on for tens and tens of thousands. Of
But
years.
that's Tammuz and Jesus' birthday.
Yeah.
That's what that is. So that
I mean,
huh?
what's so wrong with celebrating the change of seasons?
No, it's the reason you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's the intent.
Because they're talking about is a new birth. All of a sudden, at that particular point, the days started getting longer. So they are celebrating a rebirth.
The Tammuz was supposed to be reborn during the winter solstice and bring light to the earth. And that was what that lady name? Who did the dogs ate her in the streets of? What was her name? Jezebel's son. I'm Jezebel's mom. Jezebel's son was Tammuz. That and the Catholics took that story of Tammuz, and that's why Jesus' birth was during that winter solstice, because that was representative of that.
New birth.
And no matter where, and look at New Birth
It's
Church.
amazing how
But
it all just fit.
yeah, but that's the truth.
And
That's the way it happened.
that's what Catholicism
If you
did.
push that
They-
square peg hard enough into that round hole,
Yeah.
it fit.
Yeah, I mean, but think about it. They were trying to get
Sure.
this large group of people with all their different beliefs. So
Oh, I know.
I'm gonna incorporate some of your beliefs, but we're gonna change it a little
And
bit.
everywhere they
So,
went, they
yeah,
did that.
Yeah.
And I mean, even in
Well,
Haiti,
read the history.
you can
Just
vote
read
on
the
the
history of
Catholic
the
Church.
development of the Christian church, and you see all the Tertullian and all these guys, and people burned at the stake for we can't have that.
Yeah.
So let's get rid of that.
So
You know,
these are the things that we have to.
too much chaos. Let's make order.
So anyway, that's the reason I stopped doing that, and because I started looking at where the origin of it,
Yeah.
and my reason now was quite different, of course, than what it was in the beginning for not doing it, because I understand much more than I did then.
So now you could do it with
Anyway, Bob,
clear intent.
yeah, with clear intent, and I will be doing it with clear intent right at Hampton, Maine.
But this time he won't be falling asleep.
But it may.
Now,
it
but
may
to be
give
honest,
the-
I'm gonna tell you this, then we're off
it may
with
give the appearance of a certain.
the last one
pagan
that I
ritual.
did. I did this. We came together as a group of churches, and the last one that I did, I was challenging it during this period, and I stood to preach. And this pastor who died a year and a half ago, and ain't been buried yet, it was at his church. And when I got up to preach, they turned the mics off. And nobody could hear what I was saying until I realized the mics were off. And then my voice began, I raised it, and it began to penetrate. And I asked, why do you do that? And he swore it was an accident, but then I thought back, and I saw him do that, and they turned the mics off. It was all because I had began to challenge, why you do all these services and the Thanksgiving thing. This ain't had nothing to do with no pilgrim. Abraham Lincoln did the Thanksgiving thing. They had nothing to do with that. And so they, I was the, hey, is it?
Proudly pagan.
You was a rebel pagan.
I was a rebel.
Proudly pagan.
Well, they said, but you know what I say, rebellion is witchcraft.
That's it.
Depends on what you rebel against, right? Okay, we're going. People on the phone, people on the broadcast, not yet. I want you to be very, very careful when you're moving around, because keep in mind that you got to drive for everybody out there. And there are some people who don't only just drink and drive, they drive while they drink too. So be very careful. And hopefully we will see you, and you will see us or hear you something next weekend. All right?
Okay.
Enjoy your
All right,
families.
will do.
Okay, and Rainier,
Yes.
don't do that nativity scene. Don't take it down.
Nativity scene.
Y'all gotta have a nativity scene with all the babies y'all got right now.
Have the baby pose.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be our fun time, Pastor.
Oh, okay.
All right.
All right. Audrey?
Hey, girl.
Okay. Shema